now we've seen a lot of accusations coming out. And we've talked about accusations, we've talked about the need for investigations, but what it seems like what's happening now is that someone very high profile in the public eye is accused and automatically a company takes action. So are we getting to the point where an accusation automatically means a conviction?
Yeah, I hope not. As I said before, as a result of this movement, we've had the positive development where women are automatically cloaked with at least some initial credibility when they make these claims. Well, the same should be true of the victim, of the harasser, the accused harasser. If they deny the allegations, they too should be believed until such time that you have some evidence that suggests that they're not being credible. It has to be fair to both sides of the process. And I hope that as a result of this movement, but I think we've seen some examples where employers are engaging in a rush to judgment because they don't want to deal with the press that's coming out about it.
Right.
They don't want to deal with the pushback.
They don't want to lose sponsors.
They don't want to lose sponsors. They want to be out in front. They want to look like they're really supporting women in the cause. But I hope they don't do that at the expense of not giving the accused at least a fair shake to defend themselves. Now, it's important to remember that an employer, at least in the private sector, absent a contractual obligation, doesn't owe the accused any sort of due process. They are free to say, you know what, we just don't want to deal with it, and Kevin, I'm sorry, you're gone. Okay? But that's not a good place to be. We don't want to be in that situation. And I think, I hope employers don't jump the gun and accord people an opportunity to tell their side. And then, of course, if you find that there's been the allegations are sustained, well, then by all means take the action that you have to. But if you remember, Al Franken was complaining about that very thing.
Right.
If you remember, he said, well, yes, I engaged in this behavior, but it wasn't, it needs some context. It wasn't as egregious as it's being portrayed. Some of it was consensual. He wanted to explain himself, and he was saying, although it was wrong of me to do, it doesn't warrant me losing my Senacy. And there was going to be a process where a Senate committee was going to look into it. But the pressure that was put upon him was too great. And he reluctantly resigned, even though he said he wanted to engage in that process to hopefully vindicate in some part some of his conduct. So, I think that we want to be in a place where it's fair to everybody and that employers go through this investigative process so that at least you can show that it was fair. And there is a concept out there, and it hasn't gained much traction yet. And we'll see whether it gets any traction going forward. But for the employers who jump the gun and don't accord the accused the opportunity to defend, the argument is, you male stereotyped me. Mm. Just because I'm a male, you assumed that I must have done it. And that's sexual stereotyping.
And what can be the repercussion from that?
Well, people try to make that as a sex discrimination claim.
So wrongful termination.
Wrongful termination on the basis of my sex, in this instance being male. And because I was male, you automatically discredited my denial of the accusation.
Because sex is a protected class, right?
That's correct.
So if I get fired because of my sex and I argue it effectively, then you could probably owe me some money.
Potentially. So, whether or not that theory is going to gain traction in this context, I don't know. But just as a matter of just basic fairness, you should give people a shot to at least tell their side of the story, and then you make the call.